Welcome, everyone. You know that feeling of anxiety, right? That constant hum of worry in the background? Today, we're going to look for some answers in a pretty ancient source, the Quran. We'll explore its framework for finding inner peace, a guide that's been used for centuries. So, you might be wondering, what could a 1400-year-old text possibly have to say about my stress, my very modern feelings? Well, it turns out, a lot. The Quran actually has a very specific and nuanced vocabulary for our inner world. And to understand its remedies, we first have to understand its diagnosis. Okay, so before we can even talk about solutions, we gotta get the diagnosis right. And in the Quran's view, that all starts with the concept of the nafs, the self, or the soul. Think of it as the stage where all of our internal dramas play out. So the Quran presents the nafs as this dynamic inner arena. It's not inherently good or bad, but it's constantly being pulled in different directions. And when it comes to the distress we feel there, the Quran gets incredibly specific. Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting. Instead of just one generic word for anxiety, the Quran separates our distress into two very distinct feelings. You've got hazan, which is grief over the past, and hum, which is that worry about what's still to come. Now, this isn't just about words, it's a diagnostic tool. It's asking you, are you haunted by yesterday? Or are you paralyzed by tomorrow? Knowing the difference is the first big step. So, with that diagnosis in mind, what's the prescription? Well, the Quran doesn't just offer some vague comfort. Nope. It lays out a practical, three-part foundation for building real, genuine inner resilience. And here they are. This three-part framework, sabr, shukr, and tawakkul, forms the absolute core of spiritual resilience. These aren't just abstract virtues, you guys. They're actionable mindsets. So let's start with the first pillar, sabr. You know, it's so easy to hear the word patience or sabr and think it just means passively waiting around. But it's the complete opposite. The Quran describes it as an active, resilient kind of perseverance. It's the conscious choice to stand firm, to restrain yourself from hitting the panic button when things get tough. It really is emotional strength in action. The second pillar is shukr, or gratitude. And look, we hear from modern psychology all the time that gratitude is a powerful tool for reframing our perspective. The Quran frames it as a spiritual law. Being grateful for what you have doesn't just make you feel better, it actively invites more blessings into your life. It's a total shift in focus from what you lack to the abundance you already have. And finally, we have tawakkul. This one can be tricky. It is absolutely not fatalism. It's the act of doing your part, that famous saying to tie your camel, and then entrusting the final outcome to a higher plan. This is huge because it releases that deep-seated anxiety that comes from trying to control things that are, let's be honest, ultimately way beyond our control. So, with those pillars as our foundation, the Quran then gives us these practical, almost therapeutic tools to actively cultivate calm in our daily lives. And this verse right here, this is one of the most cited verses on this entire topic. And for a very good reason. It introduces a powerful, actionable tool, dhikr, which literally means remembrance. And this is where ancient wisdom and modern science totally shake hands. Dhikr functions a lot like mindfulness meditation, which we know from studies can actually reduce stress by calming our nervous system. It's a technique to break out of those anxious thought loops by just grounding yourself in the present. You know, what I find just fascinating here is the Quran's honesty about human nature. It says we were created halua, which is a state of restless, anxious, and fretful. It basically acknowledges this as our default setting. But then it offers an exception. Those devoted to salah, or ritual prayer. This isn't just about reciting words. It's a full mind-body discipline. The physical postures, the focused recitation, they create these structured breaks in the day that interrupt anxious cycles and reconnect you to a bigger picture. It's framed as the ultimate tool for emotional regulation. Now, these concepts aren't just abstract ideals. The Quran uses powerful human stories to show them in action. And there's maybe no better example of facing profound anxiety than the story of Maryam, or Mary. Her story is a masterclass in facing overwhelming anxiety. I mean, just imagine it for a second. A young, devout woman, suddenly pregnant, facing the judgment and condemnation of her entire community. The internal and external pressure must have been just immense. And this is so, so important. The Quran validates her anxiety. It doesn't portray her as weak or lacking in faith. It shows her very human response to an impossible situation, presenting her distress as completely real and totally understandable. And here's the key insight. The divine intervention wasn't about making the problem disappear. Instead, she was guided to find physical and spiritual sustenance and to remain calm, to surrender the outcome of the social confrontation to God's plan. So, Miriam's story shows us that resilience isn't about avoiding trials or anxiety. It's about finding strength in the middle of them. Her faith didn't give her an easy life, but it absolutely gave her the resources to endure an impossible one. And all of this brings us to the core promise that underpins this entire Quranic framework for dealing with anxiety. It's a message of profound reassurance. This verse is so important, it's repeated twice in a row, right after each other, for emphasis. And notice the wording. It doesn't say after hardship comes ease. It says with hardship comes ease. This reframes the whole experience, suggesting that ease is intrinsically linked with the difficulty itself, not just something that comes later. And then there's this. This is a profound theological stabilizer. It's a promise. It suggests that the capacity to endure any trial you face is already built into you, granted by a divine wisdom that knows your limits even better than you do. It reframes what feels like a breaking point into simply a stretching point. Ultimately, this synthesis of spiritual principles and psychological resilience offers a really holistic path toward inner peace. It suggests that a calm heart isn't found in a life without problems, but in building the spiritual and mental resources to navigate the life you actually have. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.